before we talk about Fort Frances, I think Dale has a couple of photographs. Do you have those up and available, Dale?
Which ones, Tom?
The Quetico Falls and
Oh, yes. Kelsey, did I send you those pictures of the falls? So I was camping at Quetico Falls in the fall and walking in the park. And of course, the visitor centers are all closed, so you can't get any interpretation and information from anyone. But the campsites were open, and stumbled across the historical plaque. While Kelsey's looking for that, I'll just tease you with what it looks like. So it's one of these blue and gold plaques. And on it, it said the Mountain Portage. And I say portage. Tom and I talked about that this week. Is it portage or portage? I'm sticking with portage. And what's on the sign is the portage around Quetico Falls formed a link in the historic Kaministiquia canoe route connecting Lake Superior with Lake of the Woods in the west. First recorded in 1688 by the French explorer Jacques de Noyan, it was later abandoned in favor of the shorter Grand Portage Pigeon River route. And you're all familiar with that one. So once that portage fell under American control and on the American side of the border, interest renewed in this other route, and it was rediscovered by Roderick Mackenzie. And from 1803 onward, it was used by the fur traders, explorers, soldiers, and surveyors, including Simon McGilvery, David Thompson, Sir George Simpson, Sir John Richardson, Simon J. Dawson, and Colonel Garnet Wolseley. I started to walk down the path, and I was with my puppy and just myself, and I thought, well, I'm not going to go and do the whole thing because I'm a bit of a chicken in the bush. But I think it's something worthwhile to look at and to go and do that hike, to envision or to walk through with the falls roaring beside you and knowing, hearing them, why you need to do this, because you can't go over the falls, obviously, and to get down to the bottom and then to look at the Kaministiquia River just flowing off it in front of you. I think it'll be quite nice to do. It seems to be well maintained. I think it's a fairly easy hike, change in elevation, but not all that difficult, I don't believe. So I think that's something that we should do when we get a chance to come to Thunder Bay, get out to Quetico Falls and look at this plaque and walk the mountain portage.
Yeah, the photo I have is just of the plaque that is not for Quetico Falls. So.
Okay. So I let me just see if I can quickly get my files opened. I'm not all that quick at this.
Do you want me to pull up the other one while you're looking for it?
Sure. Sure. Okay, so the one that Kelsey has on the screen now is the one that Michael de Jong talked about. And so you can see there's a lot of writing on the plaque, and it's a chronological, there's some time frames on it as it builds a bit of history. And this is apparently right where those council chambers were when they signed the documents for the merger. Fairly nicely maintained, better now than it was before. The plaque in the front is yes, correct. Yeah, that's the Parks Canada historical designation plaque. So there's some information that the feds have put there to talk about this. The monument originally put there by the founder of the Historical Society, Peter McKellar, in 1916, I think. So it's been there a long time, but that too is a site you could stand at and look around and kind of envision, although it's difficult to see the water past the trains, but you'll get a sense of what it was like at that time. So let me see if I can see some Quetico Falls pictures.
Carl Coster, Ranger, maybe you could speak for a second about walking in Grand Portage. I know you mentioned it during other recording about that there is plaques going to be put up in certain spots, or walking tour of the Grand Portage. If you're around, I wouldn't mind mentioning that again. That was super great.
Now, to share my screen. not sure how to do that, Kelsey.
On the screen, you should push the green button, and then you're going to pick whatever the picture is that is what you're trying to show. So you have to have the picture up.
Yep,
There we
got
go.
it up there. Oh, I'm not very, this is not turning out very good. No, I think this is a bust. Hang on. There we go. So if you haven't been to Quetico Falls, that's the falls as they come spilling from the north and they come down. And then they spill over. I had a picture of the downstream side, but I had some trouble yesterday. There we are. Had some trouble opening these on my other computer. And that's after the waters come tumbling across the falls. So as you're looking down here, the portage is on the right-hand side, comes from the top and weaves its way down to that elevation. And that's about it on those two, on that item.
I noticed in the chat that someone said yes to walking tours.
Yes.
And yeah, so one of the intentions that that Dale and I have talked about is coordinating those things. So we'll talk more about that. Another historic site that is germane to Rainy Lake House is Quetico Park. And there's a river that flows through Quetico Park called the Moline River. And on the Moline River is a location where John Tanner was ambushed and nearly killed. Left for dead by the assailant. He survived the attack and found his way to Rainy Lake House. And a number of us that are ambitious and would like to visit that site, but we need to do some research to make sure that we know exactly where we'd be going. The other feature in Quetico that don't have to be terribly ambitious to visit is the portage between French Lake and the French River that flows out of Windegustagun Lake. It's a 2-mile portage, but it's well documented, and that location is where all of these characters that we talked about today passed. It's a bottleneck there, and so going to that site and being present on that site is something that that we'd like to offer as well, in addition to the visiting the library at the visitor center at Quetico Park. and then Fort Frances has a lot to offer. I know that Kelsey has mailed out Mona Hunter's narrative of her visit this summer to the Fort Frances locations, that's plural, of Rainy Lake House. A couple of attempts at locating for the Northwest Company, and then a location for the Hudson's Bay Company are there. And Mona found help from someone who lives in Fort Frances named Merv Ahrens. And Merv said if we let him know in advance that he'll meet us, and you know, he's a fur trade amateur historian, but he's lived on the Rainy River and in Fort Frances for the last 30 years, and that's been his study, and he can help interpret what we're looking at. And if you look at Mona's work, you'll find that there's a lot to see there, and it would be really fun. Another site that that would hold a lot of interest would be Fort Snelling. It's a little confusing. There's two Fort Snelling administrative units. One is the Department of Natural Resource Park, a wooded area along the river, both Minnesota and Mississippi River, is called Fort Snelling State Park. And then the Minnesota Historical Society maintains the buildings that weren't destroyed in development of the Twin Cities area, and it's quite extensive. And they have historians there that can assist us in understanding what Fort Snelling had to offer as an outpost in the middle of nowhere in the early 1800s, but specifically how it supported and supplied Stephen H. Long's expeditionary force and launched them up the St. Peters River, which is now the Minnesota River. Pembina, North Dakota, has a lot of fur trade history from the period of time surrounding the development of the Métis people, and there's a lot to see there. And then we get to Winnipeg. And Kelsey, I don't know if you're able to bring up some of the slides of that we have from Winnipeg. Is that and the
I'm
map?
happy to do it. Would you like the map first or the slides?
No,
or the
let's look
pictures?
at the map first. That sounds great. So this map was prepared for us by the Tourism Winnipeg. It's kind of like a Visit Cook County version for Winnipeg, and the major historic sites that are in the downtown Winnipeg area. Fort Gibraltar, if you recall, we talked a little bit about it this morning. It was dismantled by, it was a Northwest Company fur trade post, and it was dismantled in the Pemmican Wars by the Hudson's Bay Company, and it's been rebuilt in the same way that a fort like, or a place like Grand Portage has been rebuilt, and it's managed by a nonprofit called Festival de Voyageurs, and Festival puts on a heritage week in the winter in Winnipeg, in the St. Boniface area, and Fort Gibraltar is kind of like the headquarters for that. Fort Douglas was the Hudson's Bay headquarters. The Manitoba Museum. When I first visited that location, it was called the Museum of Man and Nature, and then it went through another name change. It was called the Museum of Civilization, and now they've settled on the Manitoba Museum. And the Société Historique is another location in Winnipeg and in St. Boniface that I haven't visited, but it has a great deal of interpretation about St. Boniface and the Métis culture, both the Francophone and the English, the Anglo Métis cultures. And then Upper Fort Garry, when I visited Winnipeg, there was nothing there. There was a plaque, and I wanted to see Upper Fort Garry, and I thought it was kind of like Fort William or something. And, I thought I was lost, and I was walking around, and I'm pretty close. It's got to be around here somewhere. Well, out of nowhere, Parks Canada interpretive person appeared and began to explain and interpret what Upper Fort Garry was, and said, well, what I guess what you're really looking for is Lower Fort Garry, which is maybe about 25 miles north of where I was on the Red River. And I went there eventually, but really I was looking for Upper Fort Garry, which was the Hudson's Bay location in the 1820s. And then the St. Boniface Museum, again, has a lot of historic information. And I see the Manitoba Archives, number 5 over on the left. The Manitoba Archives has all of the Hudson Bay journals. I think Ted Catton said that he wanted to visit the archives, but he didn't, and he was able to communicate with them and get copies of what he needed. So I've been to the archives, and what's really fun about the archives is that if you have a question and you walk into the archives, you'll meet a front desk person. And when you ask that question to the front desk person, they consider the question, and then they summon a librarian to come and help you find the answer to your question. And so a way to dig into the microfilm library or the actual journals that they have, the documentation, becomes very accessible and very available. And so with all of these locations in almost literally within walking distance, visiting Winnipeg probably in 2023 is something also that we would like to coordinate. And going to these sites with our background that we've obtained from our learning circles, our sensing journeys, I think would really be fun. So I think there were some really good chat points that came up. Maybe Kelsey, if you could help us. Oh, wait, before we do that, there are slides. Yeah, if Kelsey can bring the slides up.
While I'm doing the transition, do you want to talk through the chats? Any chat questions?
Yeah, let's hit the chat questions. See, I think there's some discussion about the Sioux and Fort Mackinac, and that has quite a bit of mention in the Rainy Lake House book. And I think Carl gave us some information about the Northwest Company post in Pine City on the Snake River.
Yep, he did.
And you know, just as interest, he recommends a book by George Nelson, The First Year in the Fur Trade. Yeah, so Kelsey, let's take a look at those slides. So this is at the St. Boniface Museum. I think it's, you can see it's one of the original oak timbered buildings. And it looks like there's a Catholic church still there. I don't think it's an active church, but things are there to see.
If you want, I'll read along from Gary Tessier's descriptions.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah. So this is a display of a period sitting room that's located in the St. Boniface Museum. And this is a display also located in the Manitoba Museum, just an interpretive display, lots there to see, and that's just a sampling. This is a view of La Maison de Bourgeois at Fort Gibraltar. Photos taken from the Palisade Walkway on the north riverside looking south. The fort, originally located on the other side of the Red River and closer to the current Forks location, is managed by Festival du Voyageur. And this is a view of a section of an interpretive multimedia panel located at Upper Fort Garry. It looks kind of new, Tom. It might not have been there when you were there. Just north of Broadway and Main and just west of the Forks Historic Site. This is a view of another section of the Upper Fort Garry Historic Site. It looks like it's quite extensive interpretive panels. And then I think what you're looking at there is a remnant of the gate or a reconstructed gate. I'm not sure. Our source didn't get into it for us there. So this is the nonsuch. And so this text I'm going to read is provided by the museum. So the museum invites you to step back in time to 17th century Deptford, England, to a wharf lined with businesses and where a ship, the small ketch Nonsuch, has recently docked after a 16-month voyage to what we now call Canada. The original Nonsuch sailed from England in 1668 to trade for furs in Hudson's Bay. Her trip proved successful and the investors established the Hudson's Bay Company in 1670. HBC became a powerful force in Canada's history, making Nonsuch the little ship that started it all. The Nonsuch replica, seen in the gallery, was built in England in 1968 to celebrate the 300th anniversary of the Hudson's Bay Company. Built using hand tools of the 17th century, it is considered one of the finest replicas in the world and sailed 14,000 kilometers of salt and fresh water before finding her home at the Manitoba Museum in 1974. In 2018, as part of the Bringing Our Stories Forward Gallery Renewal Project, the Nonsuch Gallery was updated and enhanced. I have been there, I have seen it, it's quite spectacular. And this is a display of the fur trade located at the Manitoba Tourism at the Forks site. Oh, this is lovely. This is a view of Le Musée de Saint Boniface, the St. Boniface Museum front entrance. The building is the largest oak timber structure in North America, and it housed the largest collection of artifacts related to Louis Riel, amongst other things. This photo was taken with the Red River to the back of the photograph, which is to the west. And this is a view of a bronze bust of Louis Riel. The artist is Réal Bérard. It is located on the grounds of the Le Musée de Saint Boniface. And this is the gateway to Upper Fort Garry Historic Site. We saw that in one of the earlier slides. And again, this is La Maison de Bourgeois inside Fort Gibraltar, photo taken facing south, probably from the northwest tower of the fort. La Maison de Bourgeois would be facing the front entrance to the fort, which was located on the banks of the Red River. And as Tom mentioned, all within walking distance of each other, maybe a kilometer at most separating them all. The Manitoba Museum might require another small kilometer, we've been advised. So quite doable and would be quite fun.
Yeah, thanks for reading that. So that's a long view of some of the things that Dale and I would like to coordinate as interest grows or as interest wanes. You know, we'll definitely sense that with our conversations from you, our emails, etc. So just to look ahead in the short term, we would like to form some learning circles in 2022. And we'd like the ideas to come from the readers group in the same way that the questions that we posed to Ted Catton came from the readers group. You know, Dale and I, as we receive emails or we harvest information from the chat, we'll put that together, and then probably in early February, there'll be a Zoom invitation that comes out, and we can check in and we can list some of the learning circle ideas that have been brought forward, and ask if people would like to begin to dive into those learning circles. And then Dale and I can coordinate, put people together who are interested in some of these different topics. So yeah, in the meantime, I think reading the Falcon would be a good launching point. Getting an idea of how Edward James was listening to John Tanner and transcribing John Tanner's narrative into that document. Ted Catton gave us a pretty good overview of his view on the accuracy of that. And I think you'll see good examples of how John Tanner was engaging in big fish stories. You know, how many of this animal or that animal did you catch or kill, or, you know, hunters, fishers, you know, somewhat have a tendency to stretch the size of the fish, and I think that might be what's going on in there. But there's a lot of topic in the Falcon that could result in people getting together and talking about a little bit more in depth. And so we'd like to coordinate some of that. So yeah, so we'll come together early February, and if you can't make that, there'll be notes that we share so that you can see, you know, what did come to the surface. And yeah,